So color me inspired by all the people that I've seen on YouTube share their story about having OCD. Uh, it's time for me to tell my story. I'm not going from a script. This is all on the fly. This is all pretty much off the cuff. It's something that I kind of came up to on the spur of the moment. So I've had pure O, which is pretty much the obsessions. Mine is mostly in the mind. I guess I consider myself fortunate enough not to deal with the hand washing and the checking the locks. I've had brief spouts to where those have been prevalent for me, but nothing too uh, severe. Um, I've had OCD behavior since I was a little kid, as far as I know. When I thought something bad was going to happen, typically it did. When I was really nervous, I used to go to my safe zone, which was constantly rehearsing and repeating, and if it didn't sound right, I would do it again. A perfect example of this is presentations. When I was in elementary school, middle school, and high school, I was never a big presentations guy. Not because I wasn't good at them. I thought I always was, you know, okay at them. I wasn't a world beater or anything, but I consider myself pretty okay at coming up with a good presentation. The problem with that, though, is that with presentations, I didn't think about anything else but the actual presentation. I had to consistently, constantly rehearse, even if I had all the material I needed weeks ago. I had to rehearse and constantly ruminate and wonder, what if I freeze up in the middle of class while I'm doing my presentation? What if I start to laugh for some reason as a means of coping with my OCD? Um, Aside from that, I've had brief spouts of fearing that I would abuse my animals or fearing that I was going to abuse other children. I was a little bit of a bully when I was 6, 7 years old, but besides that, I've obviously not done anything wrong. In terms of that, um, the big issue, though, kind of rears its ugly head when we get to high school. I was 18 years old. I was just about to be graduating from high school. I was a senior. About 3 months away from graduating, I was doing homework one night. I believe I was watching March Madness or whatever. And all of a sudden, I got this crazy wave of intrusive behaviors or intrusive thoughts. And my pure O is predominantly based around suicidal thoughts or losing control. Because my biggest fear is I could be this relatively in control person and kind of be okay on the outside, but all it takes is a moment of weakness for me to go off the rails, and that's not the person that I believe is actually myself. I know deep down inside that these are all just intrusive thoughts, but it doesn't mean it makes them any less severe. I'm very confident in saying that I would never hurt myself or hurt my family or hurt my animals. But again, that doesn't stop the behaviors or the intrusive thoughts from being any less intense. The whole point of pure O or the just OCD in general, it's called the doubting disease for a reason. You could say to yourself there's a 99.99% chance that you have full control of yourself, but all it takes is less than 100%. That little brief time when you're feeling vulnerable to make you question, what am I going to do? Where, what if the what ifs get more intense and whatnot? Like I said, I don't have a script, so I don't know how long it's going to go. I might just wind up repeating things towards the end. Um, I'm just recording this from my phone. I've been watching a couple of videos tonight, and I felt that another video from a person who has this disorder sure as hell won't hurt. Um, I've had other or OCD, I guess, themes and triggers, I guess is the right way of saying them. I've talked about the abuse when I was a kid. I've talked about, the presentations, the anxiety, the constant rehearsal. I still think to this day I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. That's something I need to work on, something I need to go to some rigorous therapy for, because this is 20 years of reinforcement talking. It's going to take more than a couple of appointments for it to start peeling off like onion layers. What was I going to say next? Oh, so probably my second biggest trigger is the fear of being in the closet, being a homosexual. And this is coming from a person who has absolutely no issue with the LGBTQIA, I think that's the full acronym, community. I have no issue, and if I was, I would have absolutely no problem with it. But it's one of those things where I know that I'm not, and it's not who I am. But again, just like the intrusive thoughts when it comes to suicide, doesn't stop being innocent intense. I remember one night when I was 18 years old, I faked coming out to my dad because I thought I was going to make me feel better. I told him that I was bisexual. I told him that this is who I am, and he supported it. So that would be nice in essence. But the problem is that in general was a way for me to kind of calm down, be relatively easygoing. But the thing is that it's one of those things where we all know how OCD works, or at least those who share this disorder with me. These just offer temporary moments of relief, and at best you get a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, maybe even a little while longer of relief. But then again, it doesn't usually work out to the point where it goes away completely. So I've had homosexual OCD for probably the better part of 10 years, I want to say. We'll just be easy. I'm 27 now, so we'll say 10 years just for convenience sake. What else? I guess I've always also had... Let's see, how do I want to word this? I think one thing that I think is kind of a blessing about having OCD, or at least having the OCD that I've been stowed upon, is the fact that there's typically one theme that dominates everything else. Like when I had presentations in college, that won over suicidal thoughts or homosexual OCD and whatnot. If I was having a pretty good day, or if I was interested in dating, my homosexual OCD tended to rise up a little bit more. I also had relationship OCD when I was in college, because when things started to work out well, I questioned if it was going to last. I questioned if it was going to be the best thing for me. And unfortunately, with some of these predictions and some of these thoughts in my head, some of them turned out to be true. I've had an instance where I've dated someone in college, and I had this intense wave of thoughts and just thinking that it was going to end pretty soon, even though there was really no reason behind it. There was no reason for me to think that way. But truth be told, we broke up a couple days later, so it didn't help that I was reinforced because it actually happened. And I understand it's a coincidence and whatnot, but it's very hard for someone that has my, let's say, condition, to take that strictly at face value. In terms of my medications, I have been on medication. For me personally, whatever makes a person that has OCD feel less like shit, legally, I'm all for. If medicine works out for you, that's fantastic. If ERP works out for you, that's fantastic. If going the quote unquote natural route and taking a bunch of supplements within reason, and I'm not a doctor, obviously. Taking supplements to help you out, meditating, yoga, anything like that, that's great too. I have been on Zoloft in the past. This is another thing that I've also had struggles with. I never had an issue with taking medication. It was more so just adhering to it. Because when I was younger, I was constantly reinforced with instant gratification. If I wanted something bad to eat, typically I was fortunate enough to get bad food, such as fast food or candy or whatever the case might be. But when it comes to something like this, I was misdiagnosed a couple of times. When I was 18, and I think a couple days after I had that first initial really intense moment, I went to the doctors and they diagnosed me with, I believe it was depression. And even to this day, I don't really consider myself depressed. If I do, I consider it pretty mild. I'm very thankful that most days I'm actually pretty solid. In terms of my mood, the thoughts are always there, but my mood is typically okay. So that's one thing I can be thankful for. As for medications, I was on Zoloft for a couple of years. And it didn't really work out for me. I didn't notice much of a difference. It didn't hurt, but didn't help, really. After that, I was on Prozac for the better part of 4 or 5 years. At times, it might have worked. At times, it didn't work at all. But I think looking back on it, it was mostly just circumstances that were beyond my control that impacted, how well I take the supplement or the medications and how well I would respond to them. I've realized over the past couple of months, maybe almost a year ago, I don't remember exactly, but I've realized that maybe for someone that has OCD, I wasn't aware that you needed a higher dose in order for it to be at its highest efficiency. With the Zoloft, I was never at a high dose. I was always treated lower because they thought I had depression and anxiety. And I don't dispute the anxiety part. I've always been a pretty anxious kid. That's kind of how I got started with the whole being afraid of presenting. Just fear of, people laughing and just making an ass out of myself, for lack of a better term. So I was on Prozac for a couple of years. I've actually just recently got off of it because I've realized that even at a high dose, it wasn't working really well for me. So now I'm on Wellbutrin. That has overall, I think, been pretty decent. I'm not going to say it's been world-beating, but it's been okay. I've largely felt relatively calm. I've had days where the feelings are more intense than others, such as today. Today's a pretty rough day in terms of my OCD. That's kind of what got me started with looking at the videos in the first place, and kind of the motivation for me recording this late at night on a Saturday. So I'm on Wellbutrin. I've been on that for a couple months, and I'm also on Buspirone for my anxiety. So I'm on 2 medications. And I saw a video about someone pretty much summed it up really well. If I could take a stupid little pill to be okay with with my day or better off with my day, then I'm going to take the stupid pill. And that's kind of how I feel. I'm not the best at adhering to them just because my work is pretty busy. I work from home, so oftentimes when I wake up, I go straight to work. I don't have to, but I do it because I've always liked to start the day off productively and so forth. I've been on these medications for the better part of 3 or 4 months. We'll see how they are. I've been on Bruceburn for a little bit less than the Wellbutrin, and overall it's been pretty good for me. But again, we'll see what happens. Now, in terms of my therapy has not been so good to me. But that's more an issue with the people that I've worked with than the people than the therapy itself. Now, I'm going to preface that by saying I've always gotten along with every one of my therapists. I've never really had an issue with any one of them. The reason for me saying I didn't have the right therapist is because they didn't have expertise in what I was dealing with. I went to a general psychologist when I was in college, and they only knew like the basics of OCD, and I realized very quickly that they weren't a specialist and they weren't trained in what I had to deal with. And I apologize if I'm rambling. I know next to nothing about editing, so this is pretty much just a video that is going to be one take the entire way through. But back to the stories. I was having pretty regular appointments with my second psychologist, who had some background in OCD, and I enjoyed being in her company a lot of the time. I thought she was pretty good, but the issue is that I don't drive at this point, and getting someone to travel to come get me, bring me there, and then bring me back is a bit of a hard sell. Even for someone like my dad. My dad wasn't doing well health-wise, so that was pretty rough for him, but he was the only person that drove the freeways. So that's kind of what happened with that. It got to be too expensive, and I just wasn't able to see her much anymore. The third appointment was again another general one. The girl was a sweetheart, really got along well with her, but again, it was just very general. There wasn't much targeting my OCD. It was more about CBT than ERP, and CBT can work very well, but I like my ERP. I would like to be able to experience it. Now, backtracking real quick, I actually kind of knew what I had many years ago, but I just haven't sought proper help in terms of my therapy, because for one reason or another I talked myself out of it. Whether it was I was doing okay then, I didn't want to rock the boat, I didn't want to deal with the fact that this didn't work for me, that therapist didn't work for me, that I wasted my time, and so forth. For my OCD sufferer brethren out there, you kind of know where I'm heading. So I had to deal with that. But back to the therapist runaround. I met with, in total, 4 therapists, and they were all very sweet, all very kind, and for the exception of the second one, they really didn't know how to treat OCD. It was just very general, very basic approaches to it, which has its place. I don't necessarily mind the fact that I got that kind of experience. It might have helped me in the long run. But the fact is that I've never had ERP, proper ERP. I've known about what I've had for a while. I've known that I've had OCD. I didn't know about Puro until a couple years back, but I've known that I've had OCD for the better part of 10 years. it's actually a funny story because I know self-diagnosing isn't the best thing, but one thing that I thought would help me out was a couple of months after I started getting the OCD thoughts pretty badly. And my suicidal thoughts have always revolved around hanging. Any sort of hooks I told my mom to get away from, or to take away. It looked kind of funky around the house, but for me personally, I just had to have that out of my sight for the time being because I was scared because I honestly had never faced something nearly as intense before. So one day when I was looking up ERP, um, it's all about facing your fears. It's all about kind of getting intimate with the fears that you um, have such a reaction to. As it turns out, I grabbed a belt, and my mom and dad were there. I told them flat out that this was something that I needed to do, and they were very supportive the entire way. They didn't really understand what I was going through, um, but they were always supportive, and for that I'm very grateful. But I told them I was going to go in the bathroom and quote unquote visualize myself hanging from a belt because I always imagined it happening in a bathroom. And when I looked in the mirror, they trusted me, so I closed the door. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't have it tight. When I looked in the mirror, it was pretty spellbinding. It was an impressive experience. I was shaking. My hands were, I could feel like the belt actually had some moisture on it because I was sweating from my hands so badly. But I guess I self-diagnosed myself as having Puro, and from there, I think that helped. But the issue is that I never followed up on that in terms of getting repeated exposure to it, and B, I never sought professional help to further that process along. I'm speaking to you now on whatever day is today. It's a Saturday night. Um, as kind of a declaration, I'm ready to finally, after so many years, um, get my life back because I've had memories of who I was before this started getting severe, and I know I could be that person again. I've always my biggest reason for not pursuing serious med or psychiatric help is money is a small issue, but it's not the penultimate reason. The issue was just I didn't want to rock the boat in terms of how I was feeling, and I also didn't want to. I just didn't want to confront it. It's one of those things where obviously doing something like this, there's a lot of layers, and unfortunately, a lot of those layers have been reinforced over and over and over again until the end of time. But we're past time now. So my point is that I've already made the initial steps. I already see a peer support specialist about what I deal with, and they have Puro as well, so they completely understand what I'm going through. I like to take it one step further by hopefully seeing someone that specializes in ERP. So this week, I'm going to hopefully set up an ERP meeting, see how that goes, and go from there. I'm also going to take a holistic approach from this, and get my sleep back on track. My sleep sucks right now. I also hope to drink more water and drink. If I want to splurge, I'll drink more like Gatorade or something like that instead of sodas. I also want to lose weight. See this double chin right there? Lose some weight because I used to be pretty big into the gym when I was in high school, and about a year before my that night when I was 18 years old, so 15, 16 years old, I was in really good shape. And I enjoyed going to the gym, and I enjoyed, kind of being healthy because I slept better. I felt better about myself. I feel more confident in myself. So I know what it takes to be healthy. It's just a matter of getting the motivation, getting in the right headspace in order to do it. Also, planning on meditating more, planning on doing some yoga if I can, and also just never stop learning about what I have, finding ways to help others and finding ways to help support myself. I don't expect this to be a very simple, streamlined process. I don't expect this to be resolved for months and hell, maybe even years. But I want to get to the point where if I have a pretty severe thought, um, I don't need to react to it, because for the better part of 10 years, I've had a couple of spouts here and there where the OCD wasn't nearly as intense and I was able to live a relatively symptom-free life. But the majority of my life, the past 10 years, have been constant intrusive thoughts about um, losing control or having suicidal thoughts or a presentation or whatever the flavor of the month might be in terms of what I'm dealing with at the time. So I want to get to the point where I can think of a thought, or when I have a thought in my mind, it's just purely that. There's no emotional value attached to it. And for all the people that are suffering like me, you kind of know exactly what I'm talking about. We might have different symptoms and different behaviors and different thoughts and maybe different story, and we all had different stories. But we're all combating roughly the same thing, and we all want to get better. And in my opinion, this was not something I never planned on actually doing. But the way I see it is that this is a nice way to check up on myself, and this is also a nice way to talk to the people that I've share a bond with in terms of having PRO or just OCD in general. Is there anything else that I want to talk about? No, I believe that's it. I believe that's everything. I'm already 27 minutes in, so hopefully I didn't put you to sleep. But that's kind of my story. I hope to, as each week progresses, to just get better and better and better. I have big plans for my future, and I want to be in the right headspace where I can enjoy them fully. And hopefully, by taking a holistic approach and by being supportive and checking in on myself and being grateful and also being understanding if I happen to have a bad day, I think I can make this a reality. So thank you for watching, and I will talk to you soon.